Welcome, everyone, to the first episode of the Knitting Spring podcast. My name is Tonya. I will be your host. You can find me as Cheeky Monkey on Ravelry, Cheeky Monkey One on Instagram, and Knitting Spring podcast is where all the show notes will be. I will start a group on Ravelry called Knitting Spring. For the moment, it's just going to have an introduction thread and a questions thread. I'm coming to you from Manhattan, New York. This is where I live and work. This is my tiny studio apartment. What you see is pretty much my living room, my bedroom, my craft room. Besides this being a knitting podcast, I also like to sew. I paint and draw a little bit. I went to art school in Virginia, which was lovely. I went to art school in Richmond, Virginia, which is a great town. I did not grow up in Manhattan. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's a great town. My brother and his family still live there, and I go back home to visit quite often, and I call it my country home. I learned to knit about 10 years ago, and it was something I dabbled in, but it wasn't really anything that I did all the time. Excuse me. I've made a couple of hats, and a couple of, my first sweater wasn't too bad, but then I made a sweater of alpaca, which is another story that was just not right. And this year I decided to call this the Knitting Spring podcast because it's something that's been reawakened in me, my passion for knitting. I don't even know if I had really a passion for it before, something I enjoyed and I knew how to do. But this year, I started watching knitting podcasts. And thank you all for doing your knitting podcasts and crafting podcasts and spinning and inspiring me to knit again. I really have to attribute that to Molly from A Homespun House. Hers is the first podcast I found. And she was knitting on a Cozy Memories blanket, and it looked like fun, and I had some yarn around here, and I decided to pick up some needles and start knitting, and went down a rabbit hole, and now I'm doing a knitting podcast of my own, which if you would have told me back in February when I picked up those needles, I never would have believed you. I also would like to thank Kristen from the Yarngasm podcast for all of her encouragement and planting the seeds of inspiration for this podcast, and Chris from In a Snit podcast for your advice and encouragement as well. Without all of you podcasters out there, I know I wouldn't be doing this right now. I don't know what I'd be doing, maybe sewing or painting or something else, but I've just loved knitting. I love watching all these podcasts and being part of a knitting community. It is really wonderful. You guys have enabled me, encouraged me, inspired me, and it's been really great. I love knitting. I even have a yarn stash now. I really didn't even have a yarn stash before this year. This is a lot of firsts for me this year in regards to knitting. First podcast. First time using fingering weight yarn. I pretty much just knit with worsted weight yarn before this year. First year to make a pair of socks. First year to knit a shawl. First year I bought indie dyed yarn. First year I'm a non-monogamous knitter. I actually have more than one thing going at the same time. I was very much a person who, I know a lot of you can't believe this, but I did exist at one time. I would go to the yarn store, buy yarn for a project, do it, finish it, and then I would put knitting down for a while. It was just something that I sort of came back and forth to over the years. And this is going to be the first year I go to Rhinebeck, which I am just so excited to see and be a part of and meet more podcasters. I met Kristen, Maria, and Mina last weekend, September 12th. At Kristen's Trunk Show, which is great, and I'll talk about more of that later, and acquisitions, because I have a lot from there. And yeah, I think that's kind of it for now about me. So let's start talking about some of my things. We'll start with FOs, and I'm going to start with my Rhinebeck sweater. This is the Caramel Latte sweater by Danny Sunshine. It's knit with Manos del Uruguay Maxima, and it was a great pattern to knit. I love she sort of like has a moss ribbed stitch for the collar and the cuffs, and I knit this on Chagu red lace needles, US size 8, 5.0 millimeter, and US size 7, 4.5 millimeter needles. Please excuse me from looking down all the time. I had to write everything out because I was afraid I was going to forget something talking to you guys. It's a nice big squishy sweater. I knitted it a little bit different than the pattern called for. My gauge isn't different, but I did knit the sleeves longer. I like longer sleeves, so they go. They at least go down to my fingertips. I like to roll them up, and I knit it longer. I like my sweaters to hit at least mid-hip. It's just more comfortable for me that way. I have a few commercially bought sweaters that I wear that hit me at the hip, and I will wear a tank or something underneath this, but I have to wear a tank under those because they just ride up above my waistline, and it drives me crazy. And I really hope it's cool enough at Rhinebeck to wear this. And yeah, if not, I have a couple of short sleeve sweaters I knit this summer. I did a lot of knitting this year. I've never knit so much in 1 year as I have this year. My second FO is it's called the Eek Sweater by Anna Strict. This is my most favorite sweater I've knit this year. I love the yarn. I love the scoop neck. I love the way it knit. The yarn is Miss Bab's Tart. Sorry about the show notes. The colorway is Coffee Break, and I knit this on US 4 3.5 millimeter needles and US 3 3.25 millimeter needles. You start in the back. I don't know. I don't want to give too much away. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to talk about. But you start in the back, and then you join in around in the front to create the scoop neck. And this is a short sleeve sweater. It's made out of fingering weight yarn. This was my third sweater that I knit for myself this year. Pretty much all the other things that I've ever knit have been gifts. And I think knitting for myself has really encouraged me to knit more this year. It's been great. I've already worn this. We had a cool day last week, and I got really a lot of compliments on it. I'm not a blue person per se. As you can see, I wear a lot of black. Maybe that's typical New Yorker, maybe that's cliche New Yorker, but I do wear a lot of black. And all of this yarn, buying all this indie dyed yarn this year, really changed. I really thought when I was starting to look at different yarns to buy and stuff, I'd be buying all black, because every commercial sweater except one is black that I own. And the only other one I have is a neon pink, just a basic from the Gap. And I was surprised. You look at my yarn stash now, I have some Yowza from Miss Babs in black, and that's it. And everything else is bright, fun colors. And that's not typical of my wardrobe at all. Some of the dresses I wear have bright colors in them, but most of my wardrobe does consist of black. I like black. And I don't know if there's anything else to say about this, but I have more FOs that I can share in another episode of things that I've knit this summer that I've really enjoyed. I've knit 6 sweaters so far this year, and I'm definitely not done. I have a whole plan for knitting, which I never did before either, but I really can't stop knitting. I knit everywhere now. I think this is the first year I knit in public before, not because I was embarrassed of knitting or anything like that. I just never had project bags to carry around, and I really just never thought about taking it with me. And I was watching podcasts and everybody's taking it with them. I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. Take it with you. I take my knitting. I guess I'll show this first because this is what I was knitting on Saturday. This is, we're going into my whips now. This is in my Freckled Whimsy bag. I am doing the DCS Pigskin Party Cow with Down Cellar Studio, Boston Jen. And I've never done a knit along before either. But I had all these Christmas projects that you'll see some of them now that I wanted to do this year. I love gift knitting. I really love to give handmade things to people. And so you could knit anything you want and you get points for it. So I was like, this is perfect. So my first whip is a pair of socks for a friend, very knit-worthy. He's absolutely the best. And this is just a shorty sock. He didn't want anything big. It is, I do all my socks toe up. And it just makes more sense for me that way. It's the way I've learned. I've never done a cuff down sock. Like I said, this year is the first year I knitted a pair of socks. And this is, I think, my third or fourth pair that I've knit this year. But this is going to be a Christmas gift. The pattern is a mix of things. I did a Turkish cast on, and I did a seamless round toe, just a vanilla sock. I used an OMG heel and just a 1x1 twisted rib for the cuff. And this is the sock. Sorry if I say a lot. I didn't realize how much I said until I'm sitting here talking to you guys. And I really like it. I love the yarn. The yarn is Hot Shot by Miss Babs, and it's the Believable colorway. I knit my socks using 2 circulars. Now, I don't know if this is the right way to do it, but this is the way I started because this is the needles I had. I use 2 circular needles. I think I said that already. Sorry. And one of them is a Chalgu red lace, and one of them is an Addy sock rocket. I get gauge. They fit perfectly. I've made a pair of socks for myself, and my sister-in-law has the same size foot as me, and they both fit great. The first sock I did didn't turn out so great. I had to learn to knit to fit the foot. So I had to figure out the length and how many stitches would work. This is done with 72 stitches. This is going to be a man sock. So I've knit him, I did a test pair of socks for him, and 72 stitches. And then I increased for about 1 inch to get the number of stitches you need for the heel. Then I did the OMG heel and then back in the round. But yes, I use 2 different needles for knitting socks. I don't know if that's the right way, but every pair of socks I've knitted for myself, sister-in-law, or my friend, they turn out great, and that's the way I do that. My second sweater, I guess my sweater I have on the needles is a sweater for my sister-in-law. She is also infinite knit-worthy. I couldn't ask for a better sister-in-law. She's one of my best friends. I absolutely love her. And my brother did good. This is also a caramel latte sweater. And she picked out the pattern. She loves it. And she picked out the color of the yarn. And that's all she's seen. She won't see any more until she opens it on Christmas. This is knit with worsted weight burr base with Fido's yarn. It's beautiful. It's a silvery gray, and this isn't as heavy of a yarn as my caramel latte that I did. It's a little bit lighter, and she's smaller than me, but I figured if it will fit me, it'll definitely fit her. and I've tried it on already. I put it on some waist yarn just to make sure the fit would be okay. The one thing I am going to do differently, she is a bit taller than me, and I think where the armholes fit, I'm going to have to do a few more. After I stop increasing, I'm going to have to just keep knitting a little bit to make sure the armholes fall correctly, because this is a smaller size, which means they think if you're smaller, you're shorter, but she's smaller than me, but taller than me. So I'm going to knit a little bit before I join in the round to where the sleeve holes will be. So it'll be a little bit longer in the pattern. But I obviously really like this pattern. It's a really easy knit, and I will also make the sleeves longer than the pattern calls for, and I will also make the sweater longer than the pattern calls for. She, like me, likes longer sweaters, and she doesn't like them to hit at her waist either. And this is in my Fawn and the Fox project bag. It's great. It's a canvas bag. It's big. This is her medium bag, and I can still fit the sweater in here with all of the yarn. I have 5 skeins of yarn in here, and I am altering, since this is a hand-dyed yarn, I am alternating skeins. The first sweater I knit this year, I used indie dyed yarn, hand-dyed yarn, and I'm stubborn, and I didn't think it would matter. It would be fine, but you can see a little bit of a line. It doesn't bother me that much, but you can see it. So I do alternate skeins, and this is a gift, and I don't want her to have something that chops off. For me, I made it, I'm fine with it. I learned my lesson. Well, it took me 2 sweaters to learn my lesson, but like I said, I'm stubborn, and I think I know better, but that's absolutely not true. So my third thing I have going is another sweater. This one is for me. This is not for Christmas. This is just something I wanted to start and get on the needles and have you cast on for the DCS pigskin party cow. We started the cast on September 10th, and I believe it goes to February 6th, the day of the Super Bowl. I'm not a sports person, and I think this is the first year I actually know when the Super Bowl is actually going to be, besides my brother texting me telling me what's going on, because he's a big football fan, and he thought this cow was pretty neat, and I think it's really neat too. You don't have to know anything about football to participate in it, which is good, because I don't know anything about football. A little bit. My brother played in high school, but I could tell you his position, but not really the reason for it. But I went to all his games, and he loves football, so he thought this was a really neat knit along. This project is in my Naughty Gnomes project bag. All the project bags I've gotten this year from all the makers have been wonderful. I don't have any complaints. They've all been really well made, and they're so great for me to organize all these projects. I never really needed a project bag. I would use the reusable totes from the Gap before, and I only had one project, so it would just sort of wrap up that and off I'd go. But this year, I actually have more than one project on the needles, and this is why you have project bags, so you can organize all of your knitting. This is just the start of the collar for the I'm calling this a deep sea jellyfish sweater, but that's not the name of the pattern. The name of the pattern is Iridium by Lisa Much. And yeah, I really wanted this colorway in a sweater. This is Miss Bab's Kilimanjaro deep sea jellyfish color. And I really love how it's knitting up. It's garter stitch. I'm not a big garter stitch person, but I think this is really showing off the yarn quite well. And it's a fingering weight sweater, and it'll be long. I'm adjusting this pattern too. The sleeves, I think, are 3/4 sleeves, and if I have enough yarn, I'm going to leave that to the last. I don't know where I'll be with that. This has 1,700 yards in it, which I think is going to be fine. I used about 1,600, 6 skeins of yarn for my caramel latte, but it's a different weight, so I don't know what the difference is going to be. For all of my short sleeve sweaters that I knit this year, they were about 1,200 yards for me, 1,100, and I'm thinking I'll have enough to do a long sleeve sweater for this. And this is knit on, I really like Chow red lace needles. I'm a big fan of those. I like the cord. I like the metal tips. The tips are pointy, but not too pointy. And I'm knitting these with, please pardon me, US 4 3.5 millimeter needles. And I have two more whips, which is crazy for me. But I cast all these things on for the cow. And some, like the deep sea jellyfish sweater, doesn't have to be done at Christmas. I have a whole, the folks that were at the Bull and Vine trunk show last week saw my calendar. I have a calendar for all my knitting projects for Christmas, and I have scheduled out dates for them. It just helps me keep on track. If I don't write that down, I'll constantly be worried if I'm going to be finished in time. And I've given myself enough time that I think I'm going to be done by the beginning of December for my Christmas knitting, which that's something I really want to do because I don't like going into Christmas stressed out with gifts. I rarely buy gifts at the last minute. I don't like that. I've had to go last minute Christmas shopping with my brother a couple of times to get his wife Christmas gifts. She already knows this. I don't know if she's going to watch this podcast, but she already knows that. And you're rushing around and things are closing early and you want to get home and cook dinner. And so I'm trying to wean him off of that. And last year we weren't there at the last minute and was a much better shopping experience. This is another pair of socks. This is in my Hook and Gauge project bag. And this one's a little lighter, but I like it because you can squish it down. Everything's a lot brighter on the screen, I'm noticing, than everything is in real life. But this is another vanilla sock, and it has the seamless round toe. I didn't write down who I got the pattern from for the seamless round toe, but it's Turkish cast on, and it's less square, which is I like better than the typical Turkish cast on. You know how you get the square toe with that, and this gives you a much more, sorry, there's fuzz on that, rounder toe. And I think I'm up to the heel on this one, but you're probably not going to see this again for a while because it's not a priority. And if I have time between now and then, I'll get back to this. But this is something that, and it won't be part of the DC Pigskin Party Cow because I cast this on in the summer. And this is most of these yarns are new to me, but this is the Poems sock yarn by Wisdom Yarns. I think it's going to be it's not as soft as the Miss Babs Hot Shot, but I think it's going to make it really sturdy. It's a little bit scratchy, but I think it'll make a really good, well-wearing sock. I don't have a lot of experience wearing kid knit socks, so I guess I'll find out and I'll let you know how they look. And then the last couple of things I have on the needles, is my Cozy Memories blanket. And this is what started me knitting this year. I found Molly's podcast searching around iTunes, and she was talking about this Cozy Memories blanket. And I was like, that's such a good idea. I'm like, that's, and it's something easy, and, you just do a square, and if you want to put your needles down, you put it down, but that's not what happened with me. And sorry, I have a bunch of minis in here waiting to be knit up. But I actually have two blankets. And I think I have both of them here. Maybe I don't. I thought I did. I'm sorry about that. But this is the Cozy Memories blanket I started first this year. It is, it's all out of worsted weight yarn because it's not a sock yarn blanket. It's a Cozy Memories blanket, but it's not made out of sock yarn. Because at the time I didn't have any sock yarn or fingering weight yarn when I decided to do this, when I decided to cast on. And, well, that's the back. But it's gotten some work. Some of the yarns towards the top are things that I've done recently. And it's a pretty good size. Sorry, I'm behind you, the blanket. But the first square I did, and as you watch this podcast, you'll see that I love pink, I love purple, I love gray, and I love black. So a lot of my yarn is those colors. But this is the first square that got me knitting this year and was the catalyst of coming to this podcast. And I'm really enjoying it. I have lots of ends to weave in, but I look forward to adding to this. And then recently I started a second Cozy Memories blanket just out of fingering weight sock yarn scraps. And the little jar right there is where I've put all of my fingering weight bits from different projects, etc. And this is so much fun to do. I probably won't work on that this much, probably here and there between now and Christmas, just because I want to keep on my Christmas schedule. And I get stressed out if I do too many things one time. So I pretty much right now am concentrating on the sweater for my sister-in-law and the socks for my friend. Okay. Sorry, I'm going through show notes to see where I am. And okay, we are to acquisitions. Like I said, I went to Kristen's Woolen Vine trunk show at Gauge Intention last Saturday, September 12th. And it was so much fun. It was great. It was great to see Kristen again. I met her last May when she had a trunk show. And I got to meet Maria from the Subway Knits podcast. And I got to meet Mina from the Knitting Expat podcast. It was great. It was so much fun to talk to everybody and sit and knit and oogle over yarn. And I'm just letting you know right now, I went a little crazy. I knew that going in. I really love Kristen's yarn. She's actually the first indie dyer I ever bought yarn for. I was watching Molly's A Homespun House, and she mentioned Kristen. And I went over and started checking out Kristen's podcast, and she was a hand dyer. And I was like, wow, she really has some beautiful yarn. And I think that Monday or something, or I don't know if it was that day, but I went and bought her yarn and I got it. It was on her Lush base. It was called Moondrop. And that was the first shawl it was the second shawl I ever knit, but it turned out beautiful. I'll have to bring that shawl out in a future episode because I knit that in like a week and I wore it until it got too hot to wear a shawl. It was really beautiful yarn. So the acquisitions I got at Gauge Intention, which is a great store. If it wasn't for watching podcasts again, I wouldn't have found out. I probably would have eventually found out about it, but I don't think I would have been as quick to get over there. And I'm so glad I did. They really curate an amazing collection of indie dyed yarn. It's things that are hard to get. For me, anyways, it's hard for me to get updates on a regular basis. I'm just slow getting on updates. But anyways, one of the skeins I got was from Skinny Dipping. This is a little brighter than it is in real life, but it's beautiful. As you can see, it's got purples in it. It's a little brighter than it is in real life, but it's got like berries and grapes in there. And I bought 3 skeins of this, and I know I can make a short sleeve sweater out of that. So this will definitely be a sweater in the future. Another yarn I got is from, I don't know if you can see that, the Lemonade Shop. And it's got beautiful gray. and I had to get the gray because I love gray, and these bright fun colors. And this is 400 yards, 80/20 superwash merino nylon, and it's really soft. I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I might make a pair of socks out of this. I'd like to make some knee-high socks, maybe. I didn't tell you what was in this. This is a merino single. It's 100% superwash merino, and there's 475 yards, which is 3 of these is plenty to get a sweater for me. And then I also had to get some sleep season yarn. That I bought Megan's yarn last May when I was there. I was in May, and I will show that sweater. That was another sweater I knit this year and loved it. It was great to knit, and here's the yarn. These are really bright. It's not that bright. The camera's just making the colors more saturated than they really are. Not that this isn't a beautiful skein of yarn, it's just not as saturated. This is sleep season, and the colorway is called Gypsy. It's 100% superwash merino, 400 yards, 100 grams, and I've also got 3 of these to make a sweater. I am a big sweater knitter. That's the first thing I really like knitting. I found this year that I like to make sweaters, then socks, then shawls. I don't wear a lot of shawls, but not that I don't want to knit them. I have a plan to make Mina's For the Love of Rainbows shawl during the pigskin party cow, but I haven't gotten all the yarn for that to even put that on the needles. And then the coup de grace of all yarn was Woolen Vines yarn. She had her trunk show there, and she's you all heard that on her podcast. And this is on her Volca base. It is Pandora, and her Volca base is 80% superwash merino, 10% cashmere, 10% nylon, and it's 435 yards. I think this is just beautiful. It was really great to go there. She had a ton of yarn there and a bunch of colorways. I could have bought more, but I was trying to have somewhat of a budget and not go completely crazy, but I really love her yarn, and to be there to see it in person and choose all the colors was really great. And I think she's really great. She's a super sweet person. This one is her Gashley Crumbs. It's also on the Volca base, and I just told you what that was. I got Neptunia. Had to get some fairy hair. This is her Bite Me on Footsie, which was really exciting. I really wanted to try Footsie. I've knit socks out of Blue Face Leicester before, and I really like how they knit it up. So this is really, I'm really excited about those. And then last but not least, I got 2 skeins of her Stellar Banshee, and I definitely have plans for this. I bought 2 skeins when I was there in May, and I got 2 skeins when I was there this past Saturday. And I'm going to make a yoga cardigan out of this, and I have a pattern in mind, etc. for that. And I'll alternate skeins because I got them at 2 different times, but in a tan-dyed yarn. But I really want a sweater out of that. I knit a sweater for my niece in this past summer out of her Smitten DK on her with Octopus Garden, and that turned out so beautiful. A lot of these projects, you can go to my project page and check them out. But I think I'm at the end of my episode. My upcoming excursions that I have planned for this fall is Rhinebeck, of course, and I can't wait for that. It's less than a month away. And there's also on Friday night, it's called Untangled Rhinebeck Trunk Show in Kingston, and I'm going to go to that too. So lots of shopping, lots of yarn. I have quite a few things I'd like to get at Rhinebeck. One of them is a drop spindle and some fiber. I really would like to learn to spin fiber. That's another thing that'll be a first for me this year, and I did not. Even 4 or 5 months ago, I was just like, I'm a knitter. I don't want to spin, but seeing everybody's lovely hand spun yarn, I just really want to try it and see if it's something that'll stick. And I think it will, because I think hand spun yarn is just beautiful. But I think that's it. I think that's final for me. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for putting up with any ums and ands and so's. I'm sure it's going to drive me crazy when I watch myself. But this has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed talking to you and sharing a little bit about myself with you. And I look forward to the next episode. Thank you for joining me. Bye.